The session.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Shreema.
Great, great. And I hope it's ready with you. And I just hope that it doesn't get cold if it is hot before we actually begin it. Great. So yesterday we went through a journey. If you would remember that we went through the two journeys of mindfulness, the psychological journey and the global journey. And today we yesterday started with the virtual journey as well. Is there some disturbance around? Maybe if you can check from your side. And before we move into any other aspect, it would be great to hear from you about the exercise. Remember the mindful gym? So, would really want to know one, when you practiced, when you did it, what was the experience? And even if you could not do it, what went through? What happened? So, either way, even if you did it or even if you didn't, let's have a couple of minutes in just sharing very quickly, very short, your experience of mindful gym. Anybody would like to start? And before that, I can see Vinita is there. Hi, Vinita. We missed you yesterday, and I hope that missing yesterday's session would not be, an issue. So,
Yes, Sapan, you caught me out. I was hoping not to be noticed, but you did notice me.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I couldn't. I
no,
couldn't
but
leave.
great to have you here. Susanna was there yesterday, and I think she would be joining today as well. Okay, sure. So anybody would like to just start and share your experience with mindful gym or even not doing mindful gym?
Hi Sapan, this is Ganesh Ramachandran.
Hi Ganesh, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Great, great. Would you like to share your thought?
Yeah, definitely. Uh, this was really a very good experience I had.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This 5 minute gym. Uh, I'm used to doing the other gym, but this is the first time I'm trying to do a mindfulness gym.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It definitely gave a good experience, and I could understand, I could feel the surroundings, uh, the way it helps me to control my thoughts,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
okay, and concentrate and give a better understanding of the surroundings.
Oh, great, great. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this. I'm sure there would have been moments when you actually got lost in thoughts and then you came back and possibly the gym actually worked when you came
Exactly.
back.
And as we were talking yesterday, our mind, if not controlled, it can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's an enormous invention of God. So so there should be something which we as individuals should practice to control it and bring it to our control.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did I miss something about mindfulness gym? I mean, was the exercise for 5 minutes meditation, was that supposed to be the mindful gym or
That's correct. Shared
okay.
in the WhatsApp group. Yes.
I think I joined the group little later, so I probably did not saw that. But I mean,
Okay.
I did the meditation just regularly. Yeah.
Oh,
And
nice,
it's great.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. So, as we spoke yesterday, that yesterday was the day of I as a leader, and also of why, how mindfulness can be a transforming force in our workplaces. That was our larger agenda yesterday, and I hope we covered both from neurological and psychological perspective how it is a foundation, and also from the global practices. In terms of foundation, you would see we spoke about the productivity, well-being. We spoke about the relationships and collaboration. We spend so much efforts, cost, time in building productivity, in building more collaboration, in building well-being. But many times it feels like that we are putting efforts on an inverted vessel, where we are putting a lot of efforts, but we are questioned why, when we are putting all these things, why it's not happening. And we do realize to a great extent that the mind, the foundation of mind itself, yesterday we were talking about the whole amygdala part and internal turbulence, and how 70-80% of our mind wanders and distracted. Now we just can't expect a professional, a person, to actually grasp everything and have an output with all that amygdalic overreactions happening. And mindfulness, when it is working on amygdala, when it is working on prefrontal cortex, it can actually set a great background. On the top of it, whether we do hypo, whether we do leadership development, whether we do engagement, whether we do team building, it can be so much effective. And yesterday we, towards the end, we were talking about how it can actually help me and my team. What are a couple of areas? And yesterday we spoke about focus, productivity. We spoke about conflicts. So we would be going to, after having our tea together, tea or coffee together, we are going to have a discussion. There was an assignment yesterday where we spoke about you thinking little more deeply in terms of now how workplace journey, how mindfulness can actually be practically, very, very practically be applied on my workplace, in my leadership, in my team. So at this point of time, we are just talking about my leadership, my team, and today is whole focus is all about team, using mindfulness to make our teams much more and more effective is going to be the whole focus for today. So after this tea, we are going to listen to you from what approach have you thought more in terms of using mindfulness for your teams, and then we will build further on that. So I hope that each one of you has got your tea or coffee or water or any other beverage with you. It could be hot, cold, anything, doesn't matter. So if at all you don't have, you may just pick just a glass of water as well. So doesn't make a difference. Okay. We are actually going to do a mindfulness practice with that. What I would request now is, as we do in any mindfulness practice, I would request you to just sit relaxed. Just relax yourself in your seats, wherever you are sitting. Become absolutely comfortable. Let your body be relaxed and let your mind be relaxed. And just become aware of your surroundings. Just become aware what's around. And in your surroundings, in the whole setting, notice the cup or glass of tea, coffee, water in front of you. In this universe of objects, this one thing is there in front of you. And we are going to use our 5 senses to consume this tea or coffee or water today. Okay. And my request to you is just have a look at this cup or glass. Look at the design, look at the shape. Just notice the very peculiar design that it might have. You may even hold it in your hands and just observe it from different angles. Be careful when you are holding a warm or hot beverage. And you may also want to look at the tea or coffee or the content of the cup or glass and its peculiar color. Just notice the color. Now, holding it in your hands, just close your eyes and observe it with your hands. Again, be very careful if it's hot. You can just feel the handle if the cup is too hot. Otherwise, you can even feel the warmth of the cup. You may move your fingers around and notice the shape with your fingers. Just become aware of the touch of this glass or cup in your hands, the skin of your palm. Now, let's open the eyes again and bring it close to your nose, close enough not to be dangerous enough, and just smell it. I have a glass of water with me. I know that I can't smell anything, but still the pure air which is entering inside, I can feel the cold air inside my nostrils, at least that I know. Many of you can actually smell the tea or coffee, its aroma. And now we are going to take the first sip. And even before we take the first sip, okay, just touch the cup on your lips and notice how your hands, head, lips, everything is so automatic that it just moves without any instruction and has got such a good synchronization. And very carefully, if you have a hot beverage, you are going to take this first sip. Please be careful when you take this first sip, and if it is not too hot, keep it on your tongue. Keep it on your tongue for a couple of seconds. And its taste. Notice its taste on your tongue. You may even notice the warmth on your tongue. If it's black coffee or tea, you might very distinctively feel the bitterness. If you add sugar, you might feel the sweet taste. Very slowly take one sip. Let it stay on your tongue. Observe the taste and notice it moving down the tongue into your throat and inside. Just notice. You don't have to take any efforts. It's only about being aware and deliberately slow. Deliberately slow. As you are taking the sip, you might even realize the way it's entering into your body. If it's a warm beverage, you might feel that warmth as it is going inside your body. Just also become aware of some urge inside to have it fast. One sip is over, let me take another. Second sip is over, let me take another. The urge to take and gulp it inside and go forward to another. That's a continuous urge we keep feeling. As you are taking these sips, just also become aware of how long journey this tea, coffee or water would have taken and how many hands and efforts it would have taken for it to reach your hands. And possibly we may feel thankful to all those people who made it possible. Now, there would be some tea or coffee left, which we'll possibly consume in a bit, but I would request take one more sip and keep the cup aside. And as you do that, just close your eyes and become aware of the leftover taste on your tongue and in your mouth. Just be aware. Just be aware. Just be there. Even if it's water, you can feel the wetness, the tasteless taste of water. Now, just take a deep breath in and slowly out. One more deep breath in and slowly out. And now you can open your eyes. Okay. Now, please feel free to have your cup in the way you may want to, but let's have our conversation going on. We are back into our usual discussion. Anything that you would want to share at this point after this exercise? Anybody?
Yeah, good evening, Sapan. This is Soundar.
Hi, Sandar.
Hi. In fact, it's really a very, very nice experience. In fact, never we tasted coffee like this early so far in my lifetime. I think completely a different experience this we had. So good, very good feeling. Okay, we never had such a. So when you take a coffee or tea, so we just within a few seconds we finish it, but now we took time, enjoyed it. So I think it's a good experience actually.
Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sandar, for sharing this. Rather, most of the people, when we do these exercises, and these are very common exercises, the raising exercise is very common in mindfulness. And most of the people, when we do this, they say, this is possibly for the first time I have actually tasted it.
Yeah, true,
I mean,
true,
tea and
absolutely.
coffee is such an important requirement. At 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, the mind starts going, oh my, I need my tea, I need my coffee.
Yeah, right.
But we realize that we have never tasted it. It just goes and goes inside. It just goes and goes inside.
Absolutely.
Never we realize how exactly does it taste. Now, this tea or coffee or water is not important for us. What's important is, am I really alive to the experiences of my life? And it is not just tea or coffee.
True.
I mean, look at when we I see pre-COVID, when kids used to be playing in the ground, playground and all, and parents are around them, and what parents would be doing? They would be drowned into their mobile phones. Okay. Now they have a kid. It's a gift, and we are completely oblivious to that gift. We are drowned into it, and possibly we realize the value of the gift only when it is not there. Either we are yet to get it, or we lose something and then we realize its value. We are rushing all the time, and with the coffee and tea experience, you would have seen how much we want to just finish the task and move forward. Finish the task and move forward. That's how our life has become.
Sure.
And then we say, where is happiness? Why am I not happy? The happiness is not in things. The happiness is in the experience. When I experience anything mindfully, with awareness, with alertness, actually it starts giving me happiness. That's happiness. If I start noticing things, I have my car, I have my house, except for the first time when we bought it. Okay, we never felt happy. All the advertisements that they show, the slow motion walk inside, and people are feeling so great about, and my first car and my first house. And after 10 days, the tap is leaking, the paint has come out. Yeah, so it's only complaints. We never feel the same way as we felt on the first day, simply because we are not present to the experience. When I'm sitting in the car in the traffic and yelling, do I really think that how fortunate I am that I'm saved from the rains, sun, hot, and and I become thankful? Very rarely does it come, and it's simply because we are not present to the experiences. When we are present, being present is key to happiness. Okay, this is one key part of this exercise. The tea and coffee is not at all important, but it's a reminder to us, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life experiences? Am I present to them? If I'm not present, I'm unhappy. If I'm present, I'm happy. Even I can be happy with unpleasant circumstances. This may sound, a bit not so believable, but it's also possible. But at least with the neutral circumstances, it's absolutely true. And yesterday we were talking about that study. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. When we are not present to an experience, automatically we are getting unhappiness inside us. Okay, so that was the biggest part of this exercise, the life experiences and how much we are present. It is also one of the tools, one of the 6 tools that we are going to talk today. This is the first tool we are talking. It's called mindful break. And we'll talk possibly a little more about it. But this exercise, we did it for around 4-5 minutes. But you can do this exercise for just 2 minutes, maybe once in a day or twice a day. So when you are taking any tea break, we normally take possibly 5 to 10 minutes tea break, if at all. Okay, just spend first 2 minutes in doing it mindfully, not the whole thing. So you have picked up the cup, just look at it, just have a smell once, the aroma. The coffee is so popular not because of its taste, but because of its aroma. That's research has proven. The coffee tastes bad. As per the psychological phenomena, it's aroma. Why not enjoy that aroma? Okay, and just take 2 or 3 sips, initial sips, which are like you're very, very aware of, and that's it. Now, why to do that? During the whole day, we are getting so exhausted. Our efficiency levels, which are here, it gradually comes down, and most of the leaders, research has proven, they want to take breaks, but they don't. Breaks are highly underrated amongst leaders. Leaders are the biggest culprit as well as victim of this psychology, that I want to just do continuous work. But we know psychologically that if we don't take breaks, our efficiency does go down. But there are new researches are coming which show that it goes much beyond that. Cortisol level rises, our stress level rises. Prefrontal cortex has got limited capacity. You remember prefrontal cortex? Leadership, creativity, awareness. Now, if we continuously for hours, maybe an hour or 2, if we are doing it, and if we are not giving rest to our prefrontal cortex, our decision making gets affected. Our awareness gets affected. Our ability to notice smaller things, minute things, diligence, that gets affected. And overall, our well-being gets badly affected if we are just continuously just working without taking breaks. Breaks are important, but there is a very big misconception about breaks. Deviation is different, socializing is different, breaks are different. Most of the time when we take breaks, let us say tea break or coffee break, and especially when we were in offices, we remember that we were possibly socializing with people, sometimes talking together, having tea or coffee together. Now, these are socializing breaks. They do not refresh us. They give us a change, and change feels better, but it does not give refreshment. If we need to get refreshed, our mind needs to get rest. And yesterday we realized, you remember the 2-minute exercise? Even when our mind is seemingly on rest, it is not. But when we did the mindfulness exercise, we realized mind became so calm and so much relaxation came up. I had greater energy. Doing this simple exercise with our tea or coffee will not take any extra time, but it will re-energize us. It will take away our exhaustion to some level. If we can extend it to 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever level, on a Saturday morning, you can do it for extended 5-10 minutes. Okay, it will be a great benefit. Air traffic controllers, possibly you might be aware that they are mandatorily, legally required to take half an hour break. You know how frequently? Every 1 hour. Every 1 hour or every 1.5 hour. Mandatory, it's a legal requirement. Now, because there is a lot of safety involved, a lot of danger involved there, that's why it is required. But we as leaders are also going through the same level of stress, same level of extensive, rigorous activity. And we may not need half an hour break, but we definitely deserve a 5-minute break every 1.5 hour, and we should give it. Okay, and what you can do for breaks, one of the thing that we just spoke about, tea or coffee, definitely. Another thing that you can do is the second activity which we are going to talk in terms of mindful poise, is the second technique that we are going to talk in a while. Before we now come back to you, and let's have a little reflection on the assignment that we had yesterday. What are the 2 things that you would really want to use mindfulness for with your team? And what would be your approach? That was supposed to be a group activity, but unfortunately, we could not have all the numbers and everybody on the group, so we missed out on that. But that's fine. I think individually we can. So if at all you have any reflections on that, anything that you want to share, because what you share, then gradually we are going to build upon how are we going to use mindfulness for our team. So 2 things, 2 agendas for today. What are the techniques that we should use for what purpose with our teams? And second, what should be our approach to really make it effective? Okay, so over to you.
I had a point on this one since yesterday, and especially during the COVID times and even before COVID. I mean, a lot of our times actually get spent on meetings, and now we are remote, so 100% of the time we are spending in the meeting. And as usual, the meeting actually digress from the topic, and you are like wandering and beating around the bushes while you should be focused on the topic. So one thing is like, it is very difficult to bring back everybody back to the agenda, what we are talking about, and discard what is not important at this point of time, yet they may be important subjects. So one thing that could help there is like keep everybody focused on the topic for which the meeting is being called for, so you can have a effective utilization of that time.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And Ravi, if I can ask, because we are going into more of practicality, and for everybody's benefit, would you have any thoughts on how exactly would you want to do that? So let's take an example, practical example. We are actually getting into a meeting. It's a and let's say it's your team. So you can really command and you can really set the whole process. So what would you ideally propose, or what would you ideally do to actually make this happen, if at all you have any thoughts?
Well, one thing that I can think of when people digress from the topic, it is probably very important to them. I mean, they are invested in that topic, yet it is not the subject of the topic. And if you just snap and if you just shut them up, then, sometime instead of thinking why it was done, they are having the backfire emotions, right?
Yeah.
So you have to respect in first place that it is an important topic, acknowledge, admit it, and then park
Yeah.
it in a way that it feels respectful to the person who raised it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And
Sure.
then,
Sure.
yeah, bring back the importance that, yeah, this time is set up for this meeting. Maybe we can have a sideline conversation on the spot.
Mhm. Nice. Nice. Excellent. Thanks, Ravi, for bringing this. And I think let's hear a couple of more people on this. Meetings, they get digressed. They become emotional. Rather, many times we don't even have a good start. People are just possibly barging in, not at all focused, and so many things happen. Any thoughts on uh, can mindfulness be of any use here, if at all, individually and as a group?
Sapan, can you just repeat on this based on the last lines?
Sure. So our meetings do get digressed. Our meetings become emotional. There is a loss of focus. People do multitasking a lot during meetings. Um, what is there any way that mindfulness can be helpful here?
So one thing that in my experience I've done is usually when you say breaks, and I was able to relate to it, I take a lot of breaks,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Nice.
specifically when it is about working from home. So
Okay.
whenever any of the meeting gets over, I used to walk on my terrace for a while, do another call or something if required, and what
Excellent.
happens is that you get to have a fresh air, and you're able to get through. Okay,
Oh,
and then
great.
you see if there's a gap in terms of the meeting schedule. Okay, and it's not stretched, so probably go on to a market to buy something if required, whatever the household chores are. What happens is your mind gets relaxed to a different note altogether. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you suddenly do not jump into the another context of meeting and with the people in your team, because then what is happening is that they feel like there's a micromanagement which I'm very hard. Okay, that now
Mm-hmm.
you're prepared for all of this. So when you consciously make this effort, what happens is you yourself get decongested with the lot of stuff around you.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the small steps.
Excellent, excellent. I think, and the point that you shared on the break is great, Tanvinder, because walk, and especially in open, is one of the great ways of taking the right mindful breaks. We have, I think, Rohit also sharing something. Please, Rohit.
So I'm just wearing the mask right now since I'm operating out of office today.
Sure.
So am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
So Sapan, I think I also was doing the same kind of mistake earlier, where I was looking for some kind of, it was, I will call it more like an avoidance behavior rather than hitting the issue for that matter. So,
Mm-hmm.
going out for a walk, calming your nerves is which is an alternative therapy, uh, which in our journey of understanding our own emotions definitely works and supports.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're actually looking for some kind of, so, when you see the charged environment outside, you see emotions running up and down in a group conversation, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most of the times, the
Mm-hmm.
mistake that we do, and I have been personally committing those mistakes, is that I considered myself to be part of that conversation. In terms of, I'm not saying conversation, part of that emotion. The
Mm-hmm.
moment I was able to, get myself out of it and harness the charged emotion in favor of the situation, what is at discussion for that matter, it will
Mm-hmm.
be helpful.
Oh,
When
excellent.
you get caught with the fight which is going on, see, you have to be intelligent enough to get the pulse. What is this discontentment or argument are all about.
Absolutely.
Once you get the grip that yes, this argument is about, let's say, for example, the connectivity or whether this virtual environment is the best way to connect or not, then you will focus your attention and answers towards that virtual as a point for discussion, and you will realize that the argument and the fight which was going on will subside very gradually.
So true. So true. Absolutely, Rohit. Absolutely. I'm completely with you. And I think here, what we were talking yesterday, you're very right. I need to detach myself. What Rohit is saying is, first, I need to be away from the emotion, because if I'm drowned into the emotion, then I will also be the part of the problem or the conflict.
No, I'll be very honest. I have personally seen how you get caught up. It has taken me years of practice. Years of
I
practice.
agree. I agree.
But you are not doing damage to anybody else than your own self.
Absolutely.
So I got diabetes at the age of 30. I'm still a diabetic. Once you are a diabetic, then the flag gets attached to you. But all this is a manifestation of the deep-rooted emotions that have been attached with me.
True.
So,
Thanks.
I mean, this is more like a personal realization. I thought it should be shared with everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing this. And I think this again puts us, in that criticality, how much managing our day-to-day emotions is important. Now, we are talking about meetings. We are talking about how it get derailed by emotions, and specifically on Rohit's point that when emotions overpower us, and it brings us again to yesterday's point, what is driving us at this point? Is it prefrontal cortex or is it amygdala? And Rohit's experience, what Rohit is mentioning is all about, am I getting caught up in my amygdala and it's completely overpowering, or do I have something which psychologists call as metacognition? And mindfulness many times is correlated with metacognition. Metacognition is nothing but I'm neutrally being aware of my emotion and my thought. So cognition, thinking, but aware of my thinking is metacognition. And metacognition is considered to be one of the biggest virtues of leaders, because it does exactly what Rohit is mentioning. It detaches us, and now I'm able to take the decision in a better manner. So we again see that there is a hint that mindfulness can possibly help us achieve that. Now, how exactly do we do that is also something which we will discuss. I think Susanna also had something to say.
Yes, so I am a little bit more pragmatic probably on my thoughts, but a lot of the times we have days and days full of meeting. So, and when people are in the late part of the afternoon and they come with a very big topic, people are gonna be tired just by how the day goes. So I'm just thinking in my group, I would like, if it is something very important, to put it early in the morning when people probably are a little bit more fresh. And also they put a meeting of 3 hours and there's no breaks in between. There comes moments in which people are just in the moon. They are gone. They are not even there. So probably make more meaningful, more quality, shorter meetings. And if you really need to have all that time, um, focus on people to have breaks from time to time so that they can refresh, as you mentioned, and really come back. And now in the virtual world, we have noticed in our team at least that if we have the camera, we are there. If we don't have the camera, people typically are working in something else. And it's just all of a sudden it's like, so what do you think about that? Like, what was the question? And no, and we noticed that nobody was paying attention. So we're really asking everybody to put the camera, but that's just again more pragmatic technically. But the other is more like in the mindfulness part.
Oh, excellent, Susanna. And I think these are very good ideas, that doing it at the time when people are more fresh, like in the morning, or giving proper breaks, keeping it shorter. These are very good techniques. Only problem could be that we may not have the choices all the time, but I think whenever we do have choices, we must do that. Now,
one thing, sorry.
Yes, yes, please. please.
One of the very important. I was also writing on one of my blogs also that.
Tanvinder, can't see you actually. Would it be possible for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
So
good to see you, Tanvinder.
So I even wrote on this a few months ago a blog and on the mindfulness part only related to that. And I said it's a cup of tea when you look at this. And I was remembering all those things that I wrote. Is that you look at this COVID period and you look at a city like Bombay or other places where you have very small houses. Okay, and the best way to look at the mindfulness critically would be that you look at the way you are treating your parents or the members in the house when your meetings are on, and they are actually, hearing everything that what you're saying and the way you're saying and what you're hearing, and probably they are not able to switch on the television or anything. So how would you react? What are the emotions that you have, and how do you control them? That's a very self-reflective, very self-aware part of the mindfulness.
Great. Thanks, Arvinder, for sharing this. I think let's talk about this part also during our session. That's very interesting. Now, let me share something with you, which Google uses about meetings, and let's first experience it, and then let's see what happens. Okay, it's a 1-minute exercise, and it's very similar to the exercise, if you would remember, we did yesterday at the beginning of the session, becoming aware of the surroundings. We are going to do a very similar exercise, 60 seconds. Okay, so just become relaxed, sit comfortably, and now for next 20 seconds, the count of 20, just notice the surroundings. Just notice the surroundings, doing nothing, just surroundings, the colors, the size, the shapes, becoming so focused that nothing else matters. Now, for the next 20 seconds, just close your eyes and become focused on your posture, on your body. You need not focus on any specific part, but just be aware of the whole body and whole posture for a total count of 20. Absolutely aware and also completely relaxed. Relax your body and be aware of your body. And now, for the next 20 seconds, just become aware of your breathing and allow very conscious breath to happen. Be very, very conscious about each breath. Feel the coldness in your nostrils. And now, as we are closing this exercise, very slowly open your eyes. Okay, now we did this exercise for exactly 1 minute, 60 seconds, did not take much time, but this exercise is proven and possibly you would have experienced that we got little more settled. I'm not saying that it is drastic, but little more settled, and you would feel the difference even more. See, today we are in a mindfulness program, so you will not feel much difference. But believe me, as you're rushing from one meeting to another and you're just about to enter into one meeting, okay, with lot of things going inside your head, I have to send this email, I have to talk to this person, and customer sitting on my head, and lot of things happening. At that point of time, you sit and just do this 20 plus 20 plus 20 exercise, and then you enter into the meeting. Believe me, it's going to make a huge difference. And again, I'm repeating this part, but psychologically, our amygdala, the hyperactivation which is there because of our continuous rushed up activity, it mellows down, and my prefrontal cortex is more active. Now, in this scenario, there is a higher chance, I'm not saying there is absolute perfect chance, but there is higher chance that I will be more stable, I'll be more focused, possibly I'll be more listening to somebody else and taking their point of view also. Now, this 1 minute exercise is suggested to begin with, but if you can take it to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, the benefits will exponentially increase. And this is the second technique that we are talking today after mindful break, which Google also uses. This is the technique of mindful poise before the meetings. And as a leader, if you can do it as a group, so imagine that you have entered for a meeting. Now, a meeting lasts for at least 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes at least. And spending 1 minute, I think ROI is still good if you just do that. So I strongly suggest in the meetings wherever you can, okay, not everybody would like it possibly, and people say, what are you doing? Because, you know, if you don't understand it, but if you are an organizer and if you can manage, my suggestion is please do that. But where you can't, at least we can do it for ourselves. We can do it before getting into a meeting, especially before a critical conversation, especially before a critical conversation. Yesterday we were talking about tough conversations. You remember, I think somebody came up and said, you know, how do we actually manage tough conversations? Believe me, tough conversations are not about conversations. You know what happens? Why we are so worried about tough conversations? Because whenever we are about to have a tough conversation, our emotions get perturbed. I'm going to get some very, very adverse reaction. I have to give a negative feedback to my colleague. I have to actually talk to my boss on something. I have to give any tough conversation, and immediately my mind is saying, oh my God, I'm definitely going to get some very adverse, some very volatile, very violent type of reaction, and mind is getting ready for that. That's the only reason that tough conversations are tough. Okay, in very historical way, it's almost like you're going for hunting and you have to pass through the den of the lion. Okay, and your mind is already worried, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Now, the first thing that we need in those circumstances is again the stability of mind, stability of amygdala. I need resilience. Now, it seems very surprising, but believe me, for tough conversations, we need resilience when emotions and when that fear, that anxiety is hitting us. Oh my God, what would happen when I'll do this tough conversation? I need resilience. And then I need two things. A combination of empathetic assertiveness, where I can actually understand other person's point of view. And assertiveness, the real meaning of assertiveness is I am aware of my own emotions and I'm able to convey it without any qualms, without any guilt. Now that's where the right respect and empathy both comes up. And that can only happen when I'm aware of others' emotion, I'm aware of my own emotion. There is a person in my team who is continuously faltering on the commitments, and I'm feeling agitated. Now there are two things happening. This person is not doing things right and I am agitated, I am angry. And this person possibly has got some situation which I am not aware of as of now. Now, being in a position to neutrally look at both the things, most of the times what happens? It's a blasting out. So if we are in a position of power, we blast out. If we are not in the position of power, we just feel helpless and we suppress. These are the two things which we do. But the right way is when I'm resilient enough, I actually notice both the aspects. And I use the empathetic assertiveness framework where I use empathy first and I say, okay, it seems you're facing some issue. And what is that? Let me understand that. Before getting angry, before getting agitated, I actually ask that. And once I have understood that part, I am assertively communicating my part as well. Now, this is very common sense, show the empathy, understand other person's problem, and, and express your point of view. Theoretically, yes. But when it comes to the practical action, what happens? Our emotions take over. Many of the things which are written in the management books is something which is very common sense. We don't need really. The problem is our mind gets so overpowered that we are not able to take those decisions, but this is very much possible. When Google is doing that, I have heard, I don't have any documented proof, but in Google, many of the meetings, their screens have got these embedded mindfulness practices. People come, they play that, they go through it, and then they start the meeting. Now, I'm not saying there won't be any conflicts. I'm not saying that meetings will be 100% productive, but I think it is worth experiment, even if it is making people 10% more stable, 20% more calm, 20% more focused. It's worth. And when we build other practices on top of it, like Susanna was mentioning about, keeping it shorter and giving the right breaks and all, it can become very powerful. So we are making a start, and possibly in these sessions, even in the third session, we may not have answers to all the questions, but we definitely have a beginning. And mindful meeting, the poise, this 1 minute start that we can do, it can create magic. I have personally experienced it. I have experienced it from many people who have started using it in different companies where we were discussing, and it actually works well. One of the directors of the company, he has started doing mindfulness as a practice as part of monthly review meetings. That's really achievement. So every month when they have this leadership meeting happening, the first 5 minutes they do is practice mindfulness, and then they start meeting, and it's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. So this was the second technique on mindful meetings. Okay. Now let's move to another technique, the third technique, which is a very important one, which we have spoken since yesterday about stress, emotional regulation, even conflicts, uncomfortable emotions. And you remember we are talking about mindful introspection. Now, mindful introspection, now we are changing the gears completely from meetings and, that part, thinking part, we have come completely into emotions. Emotions, mindful introspection, over the years, research has continuously proven that introspection does two things. One, it pacifies our amygdalic and limbic reactions. And second, it builds the overall strength of resilience. Now, introspection simply means being aware of my body sensations. Being aware of my body sensations is introspection. It's very simple, but again, simple in theory, but practice, it's a skill. Now, how do we use it? We are talking about this technique whenever I am feeling any uncomfortable emotion. So I am angry, I am stressed out, I am anxious, I am overwhelmed, I am, I am having a bad mood, anything that I am feeling. What I do is I follow a 3-step formula. The first step is P. So 3 steps are PIL. Pause, inside, locate. P for pause. Whenever I am getting any uncomfortable emotion, the first thumb rule is pause. Whenever it is possible, please pause. And pause means don't do anything, don't say anything, because under the amygdala, under the uncomfortable emotion, whatever we will do, very high probability it will be wrong, it will be damaging, it will be destructive. So pause is very important. We need to give this message to our mind: uncomfortable emotion, pause. So that's the first step, pause. Second step is I go inside. Most of the time when uncomfortable things happen, we tend to, talk about other things, how other situations are troubling us, how other people are troubling us. Rarely we go inside. But the whole game of stress, anxiety, emotions is actually happening in the playground, which is here inside. So we got to go inside. Okay. So next instruction is inside, go inside. When I go inside, what do I do? Is the third step, which is called L, locate the sensations, the most critical and important step. Now, what does it mean? Whenever we feel any emotion, you would realize that it is getting reflected in your body. If I'm feeling angry, my face might feel hot. If I'm feeling afraid, it's reflected in my stomach, butterflies. Yeah. If I'm feeling heavy, pressurized, overwhelmed, possibly my head will become heavy. There are some body parts you would realize that it is reflecting in a larger way. So what we need to do is, and we don't have to be very accurate and scientific about it. The first reflection, where this emotion is getting reflected, just take your attention there and become aware of that sensation in that moment. What we are doing is we are actually experiencing that emotion in our body physically. Okay. PIL. Now, as we do this, okay, and that's where the mindfulness practice comes handy, because it will be very difficult that you are getting angry and you're just locating your sensations. You will say, you know, let it go. I mean, let me first blast this person out and then I'll do what PIL and whatever. Okay. So it will require practice over a period of time. But as we go to the sensations, the whole idea is to stay there in a very alert manner, in a very non-judgmental, non-reactive manner. That's a skill. So I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to put it away. I'm just with there. It's like, you know, emotion is, believe me, we have got such a bad relationship with our emotions. Think about it. Emotion is a voice which is coming from inside us. And what we try to do, we try to shoo it away. We just try to divert it. Now, imagine the emotion is like a kid, our kid. If our kid comes with some trouble, what will we do with our kid? Will we just try to say, no, just don't go, don't trouble me? Or we'll try to deviate ourselves? No, we will hug it. We will hug the kid. We will listen to the kid very patiently. We'll be aware. We will be paying attention. And that's how the whole thing will get over. That's the relationship we actually need with our emotions, because we have become an enemy. We consider emotions as enemy. We try to shoo it away. And think about it. If we don't value, we don't respect, we don't listen to our own emotions, how can other person will? So we got to become first respectful and attentive to our emotions. And one of the best ways to do that is this technique of introspection, because I'm completely aware of what's happening right now without saying no, it is wrong, without saying no, it is right. There are words coming in. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that body sensation. It keeps me there. Now, psychologically, what it does? Psychologically, as we are focusing on one thing, you remember, whenever we focus on one thing, the mind, which is turbulent and agitated, it starts to settle down. Okay. So again, that play of prefrontal cortex and amygdala, it starts to come. Okay. And again, we have this lesser amygdalic activity. We have higher prefrontal cortex. And as you continue with that emotion, with that sensation for a period of, let us say, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know. I mean, depends on the intensity. You would realize that the intensity has gone down. The intensity of stress, intensity of pain, intensity of anything has gone down. Problem has not changed. Problem remains the same. Situation remains the same. But my agitation, my strain against it settles down. I'm in a much better position to now look at it neutrally, as Rohit was mentioning. And I'm now able to take the decision, what is right, what is not. But this exercise for a few minutes is important. Now, if we try to use this exercise for, bigger aspects of our life, believe me, at this point, it will be like Everest. So how do we use this exercise? Is in two ways. First, use this exercise when there are very little things happening. So for example, now we don't go into the traffic, but let's just say we're in traffic and, feeling a bit irritated, small irritation. We got up in the morning and we got a little bad mood. We use that. Okay. Don't use it in very extreme situations. It will not work at this point of time. The second way to work is working proactively with it. So this is where this tool as a proactive tool come. This is 5-minute introspection exercise. My suggestion to you is use introspection once in a week as a proactive action where you just sit for 5 minutes and notice how am I feeling right now. At every point of time, we have some emotions which are going, a mixture of emotions, and where is my body part, which body part is feeling it more. We as professionals, most of the times, this part is the heaviest. Okay, almost most of the time. I mean, you don't have to search for anything else. You sit and you'll realize that your head is heavy. Just become aware of your heavy head. Just focus on that. 5 minutes, just be there. It will do two things. One, it will strengthen your habit. So when extreme situations will come, you will be able to use it. It will become a practice. Second, it will build long-term resilience. Now, if you can do this exercise on a weekly manner with your team, nothing like that. So you orient your team, just give them a little part that, this is what this technique is, and let's do it once in a week. Let's take our lunch. I mean, now that we are not together, but still we can do it with the online tools. So after lunch or before our meeting or on a Friday evening, let's come together and let's just do this exercise for 5 or 10 minutes. It will again create magic. So this was our third technique, and this is one of the very bit tricky exercise as well. So let's hear from you a bit on that. Neha would like to share something. Yes.
Sapan, what I wanted to understand is, pause, I got it.
Yes.
Inside introspect, yes. But when we locate where it is happening, it can be external or internal. Okay. So if it's external in the sense, your body parts are reacting, you give your thought to it, then, you're able to control that. But if it is, if it keeps on running still internally into your head in terms of no matter, you've taken a pause, for the fact this is happening. I've not experienced though, but I was just thinking if it goes into the head, then it may be a little difficult to just calm it down, at that point of time. So
I think, Neha, what you're saying is if my mind is not getting calmed down still, and if it is getting into my head, I am getting many thoughts. And what to do? And believe me, first, we can't do anything. Okay. Whatever we do, mostly we just divert ourselves. We just suppress. And believe me, suppression is the worst thing that we can do to emotions. Okay. So diverting ourselves from the emotions is actually a big damage. A lot of psychological and physical health issues come because of that. So it's very important that we look eye to eye, face to face to the emotion and see, okay, this is what is happening. But it does not guarantee that your stress will go away. It does not. And especially in the first few exercises, it will not. Okay. But first few exercises, you are actually just practicing. So
while you do it with the team, how do we go about it?
Oh, so when you're doing with the team, please don't do it when they are stressed out, when they are, having a conflict. It is not a conflict resolution tool as a group. Okay. When we are talking about team, we are talking about doing it as any other mindfulness exercise. We are very calm. I mean, not extremely calm, but we are just, together. We are neutral and we say, let's do it. We are building a practice. Okay. So it's not a group therapy. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. I'm actually moving further on the next topic unless there is anything important, because we have lesser time and more to cover. If you allow me to move to the next one. Shall we?
Sure.
Okay, great. So now we are talking about the next technique, which is called mindful deep work. As you would see, we are actually getting gradually deeper and deeper into our techniques. Okay, and mindful deep work is another gear shift where we are talking about focus, depth, productivity, creativity. And yesterday you would remember that we were talking about the books Deep Work and Flow. And those are not imaginary things. It's a skill, and reaching those levels may take time, may take effort, but we can reach there. Definitely. And deep work, mindful deep work is a beginning. Okay. Now, what is mindful deep work? It's actually a very simple exercise. What is our objective? Our objective is almost all the time, I'm just rushing here and there and continuously getting distracted. For intellectual activities of importance, I am hardly able to go deeper. So what I'm trying to do is, can I actually take out a small bit of time in my work day and focus during that time only on that one intellectual task? Now, there are many layers into it, but this is the first thing that we are doing when we are saying mindful deep work. And the 3 steps are TTP. Let's decide the task. The task should be intellectual. The task should be individual. It can't be group task. It can't be a manual task. Filling our bills and submitting it and claiming the expenses is not the intellectual task. Okay, so intellectual task. I have to think of a problem. I have to think of a solution. I have to think of an idea. I have to take a decision. I have to work out a presentation. Anything, any intellectual task. So decide the task which is of importance. Decide the time. And this is very crucial. What time am I going to do it and how much duration? I suggest a minimum time of half an hour. Below that, mind needs time to get settled down. So below half an hour, it will not be optimum. If you can make it 1 hour, nothing like that. Okay. Now, time also means what time of the day. Okay. Now, everybody works in a very different way, but I am saying thumb rule. Whenever you are intellectually at your highest capacity, and as Susanna was also mentioning, mornings we are more fresh. And here I would suggest, don't keep any meetings in the morning. Okay, keep your deep work time in the morning. Okay, the morning time when you are fresh. Okay, so normally for me, morning 9 to 11 is something I have no meetings, I have no other task. 9 to 11 is the deep work time. So it works for me, but for different people it works differently. So what time of the day? Okay. Time is also important from the angle of shallow work. Please schedule your shallow work so that it does not interfere in your deep work time. So scheduling your email checking, social media, news. For example, every day I have a schedule at 2 p.m. after lunch when I check news and social media. And once in a day is enough. I mean, I don't think there is fire somewhere and people will write to me on social media or anywhere else. So, we don't need that much of frequency. Okay. And again, meetings. Can we schedule basic meetings? So normally when it's a very deep level discussion, I schedule it in the morning or possibly between 4 to 6. But if it's a very, administrative, logistical type of meeting, okay, it's better to schedule it between 2 to 4. 2 to 4, psychologically and by studies it is proven, we are at our lowest, capacity levels generally. Okay, so deep work time. And third important part is place. Where am I going to do my deep work? Okay, and place is somewhere which organizations can also help out. One of the organizations where we were working, they actually created a separate conference room and they designated it as deep work, conference room between 9 to 11. So 9 to 11, anybody can go there. They know that it's only for deep work. Even if 10 people are there, nobody is disturbing them and they are doing their own work. Okay, so place is very important because you should not be disturbed. And obviously then you need to take care of our biggest friend and enemy, which is the technology, which is our mobile phone, and we need to decide what do we do about it. Do we keep it off? Do we keep it silent? We don't pick up any phone. When people do very regular deep work, generally their teams know. For example, my team knows that this time is not the time when I need to be called. So then people call later. I mean, unless there is a fire, obviously. If there is a fire, if there is a problem, obviously we can be disturbed. But generally, mostly we should not be. And so we create an infrastructural support system. So Deep Work as a book by Cal Newport talks about this external infrastructure. When we are talking about mindful deep work, we are also talking about internal part. How do I keep my restlessness low? And that's where the practice of mindfulness, when actually I'm entering into the deep work, one of the best ways is to take brisk walks. This is what I do. Again, I mean, it works differently for many other people. So before getting into the deep work activity, I take 3 to 4 minute brisk walk. What it does is it actually settles down a lot of agitational and emotional. There are a lot of voluntary thoughts which are coming in and they get released out, and my mind starts to settle down. The second step that I do in deep work is I throw a question into my mind and I say, this is the answer that I need. And I deliberately avoid thinking about it. Thinking, very, active thinking. It's like I'm just creating an open ground, empty ground, where now any new thought can come in. The eureka moment that happens, if it can happen in bathtub, that shows that we don't have to be actively and forcefully thinking about it. It actually comes out automatically when we have actually given all the inputs inside us. So we need an empty ground where the creativity and ideas can actually come out. And then I use whiteboard and pen and paper. This is my personal experience. If I'm looking at the screen, I can't think creatively. Now, again, it differs from people to people. But for me, whiteboard is the biggest creativity builder, because whatever thoughts are coming, it's like you are brainstorming with yourself. Whatever thoughts are coming, you're just writing, just writing, just writing. Okay. And as you keep writing, okay, some ideas click and then you write again. Then what I personally do is I write it on paper. The system gets opened up only when it needs to be put in a neat manner. Thinking part away from the screen. So this is the deep work schedule that I follow, but you can follow very differently. So for example, rather than brisk walk, you might want to listen to a song, or you might want to, just do a bit of cycling or bit of jogging, or I don't know, I mean, whatever works for you. But the whole idea is deep work time once in a week. I suggest Friday to start with. So to start with, once in a week, half an hour or 1 hour. Cal Newport does 3 sessions of deep work every day, approximately 1.5 hours each. Okay, so that's the level of, and he measures his success by how much of deep work time I have given during the month. Okay, so we can also gradually go there, and believe me, that deep work time is so helpful. And again, I mean, what we do inside, it's again an area of discussion and deliberation. And as we go forward, there will be a lot of refinements. We can't discuss everything now, but this is a beginning. And once we start doing that, we can actually now refine. And we are in a very, very good program structure that we are on a 2nd day, and the 3rd day we have deliberately kept it next week so that we can practice. And next week, as we come back, we actually refine and strengthen it better. So this whole week, and I'm going to share with you an ideal schedule of mindfulness activities for you. If you would like to follow that, that would be amazing. That's workable, and that's useful. Yeah. So this was the 4th technique, and now we are coming to the last technique. Today we might overshoot by a few minutes. If everybody is okay, I'm giving heads up in advance so that we know and we may plan. And if there is nothing more important, we may want to reschedule, maybe like 10 minutes or something. We might overshoot. There is a bit more to cover. That's the reason I'm saying. So here we go on to the last technique, which is powering our morning. Our mornings. Many times it happens that if our mood is bad, our morning is not so efficient, it gets reflected in our day as well. How do we make morning effective? Now, this is a very important thing, but believe me, it is actually much more very simple and very easy to do as we may actually think of. Before we go to that, I think Susanna had raised hand. Susanna, would you like to share anything at this point?
Oh, thank you. Actually, when you were talking about the mindful deed work,
Yes.
one of the recommendations that we always have for our people is in time management. Everybody says, I never have time. So what you were mentioning right now can pair completely with that. What we recommend is plan your agenda ahead of time, like a week before, and only plan for 40-50% of your time so that people that just show up have time and it doesn't bother you. But choose one or two tasks that you really want to advance and put them in a specific strategic times when you can think of and actually change your area. Don't be in your desk where everybody's going to find you. Book yourself a meeting room where not almost hide, but almost like so that you don't have interruptions. And I really like the fact that you mentioned figure out the time of the day when you work at your best, because they should be putting those times at that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But yeah, that was it.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. That reinforces that we are doing the right things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, powering the morning. Now, before we get into the powering part, look at how our mornings start. Most of the people, and the studies show that most of the people pick up their phone within a minute of waking up. That's true for most of us. We wake up and we want to pick up the phone. We want to check an important email or a WhatsApp, a crisis message. As we pick that up, we go to the LinkedIn, we go to the Facebook, then we go to the Twitter, then we say, let me check the news. And we have already spent almost 15 to 20 minutes. And then we realize, oh my God, I'm getting late. And then we rush out. This is how typically our day starts many times. Now, what it does is, as soon as you pick up your phone and you start checking those things, it gives a huge amount of stimuli to your brain. Now, it's a crime against the brain because the poor brain had been sleeping, taking rest, trying to take rest despite our all efforts to not to allow it to rest. And it has taken the rest, it is fresh in the morning, and it wants to make a good steady start. And what we do, we say, brain, mind, I will not allow you to rest. I will keep you agitated and stimulated, and we pick up the phone. We have lost the opportunity of making a great beginning of the day by using the mobile phone and its stimulus. My sincere request, please don't check news in the morning. If you can check, please check it after lunch. If you don't check news in the morning, I really don't think that there is big thing going to change unless we are into stock market, unless we are into a very big decision making into procurement or anything else where the news matters. And absolutely, you might want to check the news. Definitely, I'm not saying that. But generally speaking, all the Twitter, news, social media, we should not check it in the morning. Okay. So my suggestion to you is, one of the best things that we can do for ourselves is delay the mobile picking up time as much as possible. And it's a very conscious thing. So, for example, I have set up a time for myself that I will not pick up my mobile phone before 9 a.m. Okay. And many times there is an urge at 8:30, I'm free and I'm not possibly doing anything. And I say, okay, shall I? But I know, okay, no, my cutoff time is 9 a.m. Is there anything too urgent? Now, I may have a scheduled meeting at 9 and I need to check any messages which are there. That's fine. But am I doing any habitual checking? Delaying my mobile phone picking time as much as possible. And let's decide a cutoff time for each one of us. Whatever is your cutoff time. So you say, no, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, because that's what my work requires. And let's pick up the phone only at that time and do all our bulk checking at that point of time. My strong request and suggestion, do not check any other social media news and everything at that time. Check only the important things. So 9 a.m. is my time when I check emails and I check my WhatsApp, and I don't check all WhatsApps. I just glance through and look, are there any real important things? I glance through the emails, are there any important things and any action needed? All the rest of the emails, social media, WhatsApp get checked at 2 p.m. Okay, so please, I request now itself decide your cutoff time. What is the time you are going to pick up your phone and do it for 1 week? I think that would be, a good test and experience. Now, if you don't pick up your phone in the morning, what will you do? Okay, and that's where another practice comes. When you get up, please go out, in your house, in your window, balcony, wherever it is possible, where you can actually witness and see nature, and if not nature, at least sky. Okay, and do the 60-second poise exercise. You remember the poise exercise before the meeting? The same exercise, do it there. Now, we are not only taking away the stimulation, which is a great gift to our mind, we are giving it another gift of stabilizing, settling our mind. And we are giving it a great start. A start when we do by prefrontal cortex and our subdued amygdala is a great start, because when amygdala is activated, it's going to go on a roller coaster. It's a vicious cycle. It will not allow us to come back. We know if my mood has gone bad in the morning, how my day goes. It's very visible. Okay, so 60-second gift to ourselves. Just go out, just stand there, just look at the nature for 20 seconds. Just close your eyes and feel the breeze, feel the air on your body. And last 20 seconds, just feel your breathing. That's it. 60 seconds. If you can do it for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, nothing like that. But 1 minute I'm saying as the minimum time, and it's very workable time. And believe me, as you will try to do it tomorrow, your mind will say, what are you doing? Why are you doing? Your mind will not allow. And that's where that struggle, that internal struggle will happen. And that's the experience. And then we say, no, I will do it. And then we do it once. And then when we do it once, we say, oh, it feels good. Okay, the next day when mind says, no, don't do it. And you will say, no, I think yesterday I felt good. Let me do it. So gradually it will work. But 1 minute, 2 minutes is very much workable. So this is the last technique that we spoke about. So just revising the techniques that we spoke. You remember we spoke about the break, the mindful break to start with, which helps us in the exhaustion and the stress. We talked about the pause, the 1 minute pause during the meetings. We spoke about introspection for the stress resilience. We spoke about deep work. And 30 minutes is something which I definitely recommend once in a week to start with. Then you can definitely go further. And the mindful morning. Now, there is one more technique which I'm not talking to you about because we spoke about it yesterday. That is the basic fundamental part, basic mindful gym. And let me just share with you immediately the calendar as well. So as you see this calendar will be shared with you on the WhatsApp group as well. And I would recommend if you can take a printout of it. In the column named time, if you can put time when you will do this, it would be great. The gray areas are the ones that you will do it. So for example, mindful on Saturday, which is tomorrow, you will do mindful morning. And then you will take mindful break. So these are the 2 tasks for you on Saturday. Sunday, there is a gap. You can do anything of your choice. But Monday, then we are talking about mindful gym and mindful meeting. So that's how we have placed 2 tasks on each day for next 1 week. And I hope it is workable. Now you would see a few areas which are darker shade, gray. And here the recommendation is you do it with your team if you can. it would be great if you can do these activities with your team. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. And I'm actually very keen to know your experiences. By the way, we in this WhatsApp group, we are going to be continuously connected. There will be a lot of experience sharing happening. There will be queries, questions. So please do share. We need not wait for the next session. We can clarify a lot of things now itself. Yeah. So sure, Susanna, I got the message and understand. Yeah, surely. So this is the calendar which will be shared with you. Now, when we actually use mindfulness techniques with our teams, okay, and I thought let me just share this part with you, that the techniques that we have spoken about, okay, are just examples. There are hundreds of techniques in mindfulness, but we have actually spoken about a few examples of different types. So for example, we spoke about mindfulness based internal practice, which is mindful gym, mindfulness based active task, which is basically taking breaks, mindfulness based deep thinking, which is deep work, mindfulness based situational tools, which we spoke about introspection in a particular situation we are using, and lifestyle choices, we spoke about the mindful morning. So what you got was a glimpse of these 5 different types of mindfulness based practices. And again, there are hundreds of practices like that, but these we find as very, very powerful to begin with for all of us. When we go for mindfulness with our teams, okay, there are a few things which happen, and I'm running this little fast and talking about only the important things. Now, just reflect back on each of these activities, techniques that we spoke about, and imagine that you are doing some of the activities together. You are doing some of these activities together. And as you do these activities together, imagine that for 1 week, you are doing, you're sometimes doing mindful, mindful meeting part, 1 minute together. You are doing mindful introspection. You have actually given them space for doing deep work. You are doing sometimes mindful gym together. Now, if you start doing it with your team, what all could happen? And as we know from multiple angles that productivity and differences and conflicts will definitely be helped out. But there are 3 things rather, which are going to happen a lot. One, even if you don't get any benefit out of all this mindfulness practice, the bonding that you will create amongst the team would be great. We go for team outings, we go for so many things, but believe me, nothing like doing a mindfulness practice, nothing like doing such a deep down practice together. It creates such intangible and such powerful bonds. Do it for 1 month and you will see a very different level of connectivity, empathy, collaboration without anything else changing. It's a great team building activity. So if we are talking about team building, nothing works like this. We have seen people coming so close. We started doing together mindfulness practice on alternate day basis with our family. And from across the cities, our family is coming together and we are doing it. It creates a very different level of bond, very different level. Okay. Second, and I'm talking of these things beyond whatever basic benefits that you would get. Second, your team will feel cared for. And this is something which they desire most. If you start helping them with these things and they start getting benefit, they will feel so much gratitude towards yourself. They will have so much connection with you. Your team feeling cared for is one of the best things that can happen to you as a leader. And finally, if the right benefits of mindful teams are reaped, where our teams are excited, our teams are happy, our teams are joyful, and nobody really has a problem with work or more work, really speaking. People have a problem when they have to deal with the politics. People have a problem when they have to deal with stubborn people. People have a problem when there are emotional issues and agitations. People have problem when they are being micromanaged. So people have issues because of these things, not because of work. So imagine a workplace which has none of these emotional issues, none of these all these things. That would be a bliss. And we may not change the whole organization, but we can definitely do it in our team. So when we do this, ideally speaking, this creates, ideally speaking, what is the best position for a leader? When people say, I want to be with this leader because this team is successful, this team is happy. That is the best success. That is the best thing that a leader can get. When other people from other teams want to say, no, I wish I would be working with this leader. And I'm not saying mindfulness is a complete answer to that, but mindfulness can be a very good beginning for that on multiple levels. And the very basic start that we can make is just starting to do these mindfulness practices with our team. And now I'm just running you through a mindfulness based team effectiveness approach. How exactly possibly you can make a start. Making a start and sustaining it is always a challenge. So here we go through some of the steps, and possibly over the chat and possibly over the next session, we are going to discuss it even in more details. So the first thing I would strongly recommend, please give them an orientation. You can arrange an orientation externally, or you can yourself give it, or you can just put a video or whatever way. Believe me, you tell people, let's do mindfulness. We have gone through such detailed understanding that we now understand, we have the appreciation, but people will not have. You will tell them mindfulness and they will say, at least on the back of, on your back, they will say, what is this? We have so much important things to do, and you're talking about sitting and, noticing the sensations and noticing the breathing. I mean, this is all nonsense. So people will not appreciate, please understand their place. They don't know. And so an initial orientation and objective orientation is extremely important, and you yourself can possibly give this at the minimum level. So as you give the orientation, another second thing is I'm, again and again saying, please practice together. If you can do even once in a week, that would be the best thing that can happen. Just put a common audio and start practicing together. Nothing, no rocket science. Two specific things, places where you can use it is using it in meetings, as we just spoke about using it in the meetings, and using it during the breaks. Now, what if, I have not seen many teams doing that, but what if when you have breaks, and at this point of time, most of us are not operating from offices, but maybe later on when we are together, what if first few minutes we are spending together in the break and taking a mindful break together? That's also great. I think the least we can do it is use in the meetings, because that's what we are anyways doing. Okay. If you can allow the deep work time, so let us say your team decides 11 to 12 or whatever time is our deep work time, and you actually allow and tell that 11 to 12, just focus on one intellectual task of yourself and nobody will disturb you. You are creating a culture of deep work within your team. Okay. Going forward, you can actually start organizing monthly knowledge sharing sessions where team comes together and start sharing possibly one article, one experience, one technique, or anything together. This will actually create a new level of continuous sharing and continuous experience sharing. So rather than it becoming an individual practice, the whole knowledge will get shared and more people will get motivated. Believe me, if you reach knowledge sharing level, you have already started influencing organization, not only your team. People would start noticing you and people will start saying there is something good happening in this team. Another level, if you want to go, you can sponsor. I mean, many of you have joined this session. Why, don't you sponsor your people to attend some of the sessions wherever it is possible and wherever you think it is useful, if not all, some of the people. At next level, you can actually take up the project, and this is something which I recommend to you also, and we'll talk about it in the next week, taking a project. Can I take a challenge? So, I want to increase the focus levels. I want to reduce the stress levels. There is one project that I take, and then we think, how can I use mindfulness? We brainstorm, we come together as a team, and we decide what to do about it. If you take something as a project, believe me, the whole motivation, the whole systematization towards it, it will go so well. Taking it as a project is amazing. As simple as you say, let's enhance our sleep quality using mindfulness. Great idea. I think most of us are sleep deprived. Okay. And our team would really get benefit out of it. At a very next level, and we have seen this happening especially in the senior leadership, where senior leaders are specially coached in mindfulness. So you may, for yourself or possibly for some of your team members, can actually get into the mindful leadership coaching. Okay, so this is the journey in your team. I would very strongly recommend. And after this, now we will be going for organizational mindfulness. So as you remember, we spoke about you as leader or individual in the last session. Today we are talking about how do we effectively use mindfulness in our teams, and the next session is all about organization. And I'm just showing you 2 case studies. Just have a glance. You need not read these case studies because these are going to get shared. These are the assignments for you for the week. So there are 2 case studies, case 1 and case 2. Alpha and beta team are going to take up case 1, and theta and gamma team are going to take case 2. And the groups and case studies are going to be shared on the WhatsApp group. It will be there. So during the week, you will be working and setting your approach, and you will be making a quick presentation on your approach. How do we deal with this particular situation in your own way? Okay. So the assignments are very simple. You already have this practice calendar for week 1, which I showed you. So you just need to do this, and you will also be shared with a workbook. We will be sharing a workbook with you. Okay. Again on the WhatsApp group. And I strongly recommend that you take a printout of that workbook. That would be very useful. Okay. So you take a printout and you start writing down your reflections. It's very short, very simple. It will not take you more than 30-40 seconds to write your reflection, or maybe a minute, but it will be very useful. So using the combination of calendar and the reflection book. And second thing is the caselet. So you are required to discuss the case with your buddies, with your team members. And then in the next session, present your approach. Okay. So that's where we, and yeah, I mean, I very strongly recommend that we share the experiences and any queries, questions in the WhatsApp group together. So our continuity is maintained, our motivation is maintained, our practice is maintained. Okay, so let me pause at this point of time, and anything that you would like to share at this point, or anything that you would like to ask. If I'm right, possibly Neha had raised hand. If Neha would like to share, or anybody else, please do.
No, Sapan, my question was apparently answered, because I was thinking how to just initiate with the team, because the same way you started is, people would start thinking, I've learned something and I'm trying to impose to them,
Oh, absolutely.
So it is very important to set the context right. The one thing you hear कि मेरे से तो meditation नहीं होता है, या मेरे से नहीं होता है 2 मिनट रुकना. That's the common answer we do it.
Oh, absolutely.
And we hear also from the team and from the leaders as well.
Oh, absolutely.
You can only talk about it when you experience it. That experience level would only come when maybe we'll set the context right.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
It was answered. Thank you. I was a little confused on that.
No, sure. Pleasure. Yes, Ravi. Ravi wanted to share something.
Yeah, actually, one thing I wanted to request is, because of the time zone difference, like it would be night there and it would be my day here now. So whatever material has been shared, I think I missed some material on the WhatsApp, whatever was shared. So maybe it can be reshared. Yeah.
Okay.
And Yeah, so I mean, I will have a very small overlap with the team, so I just wanted to keep everybody informed about that. And one question I had, I definitely read, deep work and have listened to some TED Talks from Cal Newport. But you also mentioned about flow. And I mean, by
Yes.
the way, thanks for the reinforcement. I mean, just because I read doesn't mean I practice it. So it's like a lot of the things that we read and we cannot, I mean, we do not bring it into practice. So these were very pragmatic and very helpful tips. But you also mentioned about the book called Flow. What was it about? And did you talked about those items in this tips, or it is something else that is coming up, or it was just for reference?
Okay, so Flow is a book written by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and it's a very different. He says it's a state of mind which we can reach, and the artist or adventurist, he speaks about the musicians. They reach that zone where they are like almost synced together, and he defines 7 characteristics of flow zone, which many people have experienced and they share about it, and it's a very common characteristics that everybody talks about, and he has tried to decode it, and he has tried to find out what can actually and how it can help us. So that's the book about. You can possibly call it as the next level of deep work. So it takes you to completely different level. Deep work is all about productivity, effectiveness, creativity. If you can say the magic is at flow level.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There is another book called, I think, The Birth of Superman or something. I'm not able to recall the exact name. You would find that book also interesting because that book again takes the flow to a next level, and he shares about the experiences of adventure sports people and now how we can use those experiences, again talking the same concept of flow. And it has a lot of mention about how mindfulness, being mindful, being present, being focused is actually the first step to get into that zone. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that
Yeah.
with your interest in deep work, I'm sure flow will be of high interest to you.
Yeah,
It's a
I
complicated
definitely
name.
very big fan. Yeah.
I am seeing Rajesh question about author Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, but you just Google out Flow book, FLOW Flow book, and you will find it. It's a very famous book. And believe me, even after reading the second name of the author 10 times, it will be difficult to remember the spelling and the pronunciation. Yeah. So, okay. And in the next session, we are definitely going to talk about the organizational aspect, but we are also going to build what we have discussed today. So we spoke about the techniques, and we are going to strengthen them. We are going to discuss about the way in which we can enhance some of our leadership practices, more in terms of the inspiring part and others. We are going to discuss Caselet in detail, which creates a foundation for our discussion on how do we take it at the organizational level and what could be the best practices, in definitely making the beginning but sustaining, and in the overall building the mindful culture. Now, many of the things possibly and may not be directly and immediately applicable to you, but I think it would be great to have these tools with us, because we may be in a position at some point to create a legacy of our own at some point, and I think these tools, these things will become really handy for us. After the third program, after the third session, we are going to be together structurally for one more week. Okay. And that's where we are going to take a few steps in terms of organizational adoption. And that will give at least some basic level practice. We may not have any actual implementation at that time, but it's more like a practice. It's more like a rehearsal for you in the longer run activities. So, okay, good. Thank you so much, everyone. If at all there are any more questions and any more thoughts, please do share. If you are not there on the WhatsApp group, please ask the team or share your numbers, or possibly team has shared the link to join the WhatsApp group, so you may refer to that as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's been a great session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been exciting, and I'm eagerly looking forward to next week, and also looking forward to our discussions during the next week over WhatsApp. Bye-bye. You have a good evening, or you have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Tapan.
Thanks, Shreya.